she's going, they're going there. Put on your bib and tucker, put on your soup and fish. I'm going, you're going, this is our dish. Hollywood party, get up, get out, get in there. Hollywood party, oh, nobody sleeps tonight. Bring along your girl, go home with someone else. Forget about your girl, 'cause she's gonna do all right. We'll be kicking our heels up till the roosters are crowing. Bring your automobiles up, everybody is going. Hollywood party, going a mile a minute. Hollywood party, oh, nobody sleeps tonight. Come on and wear your white tie, it's the right tie for tonight. I meet you at that noisy, girlsy and boysy Hollywood party. All the minks and sables, wines with labels, garbos, gables greet you. Taxis send us to the tremendous Hollywood party. All the girls wear ermine coats that they got from him, but tomorrow, oh, they're gonna give them back again. So let the laughter spring out, music ring out, Satan sing out, yeah, man. At that crashing, furniture smashing Hollywood party. Get up, get out, get in it. Hollywood party. Nobody sleeps tonight.
Woo! Greetings. Welcome to an episode of the Parlor Party. And you're here with Janet Klein. And today, my very, very special guest, Mr. Stephen C. Smith. Yay!
Thank you for inviting me back for an encore. We had said I loved our conversation before, so I'm happy we get to talk about Hollywood before and have a special Hollywood parlor party this time. Yes.
Exactly. So if anybody present was here for our last get together, Stephen wrote a wonderful book about the life and career of composer Max Steiner. And we had a wonderful chat, and it led to other sparkles of interests and ideas. We could talk all day long.
And there will be singing. I can't say that enough. There will be singing soon from Janet throughout.
Yes, we're going to talk about, well, we decided on a title for today's show, All Singing, All Dancing, the Dawn of the Hollywood Musical.
It could also be called All Singing, All Dancing, the Janet Klein Story. So,
woo! I do that anyway. So let us begin. I think that you had things sort of mapped out, and so you started off.
Well, I'll just say that it was so fun talking with you about one part of how Hollywood made sound films at the beginning that I realized that there was a whole other story to tell about how Hollywood figured out how to make movie musicals, because it wasn't like they just snapped their fingers and we had these fantastic Busby Berkeley movies, or Judy Garland was making great movies at MGM. It took Hollywood a little while to figure out what worked and what didn't work in the sound era, especially since the technology was changing so fast. And of course, anybody who has seen the movie Singing in the Rain, which I'm guessing is everybody here, knows that even though Singing in the Rain is a comedy and fiction, it is very much based in fact, which is that whole chaotic transition to sound film. So I thought it would be fun for us to explore together those first few years of sound movies, particularly as each Hollywood studio tried to figure out their own way to make a movie musical. What were the patterns? What were certain trends that happened that they were all doing at the time? And especially since you sing so many songs that are either from those movies or are associated with the people who are in or made those movies. So it's a little bit of Hollywood history, all of it fun, some of it dishy, filled liberally with Janet Klein singing and ukulele playing, and piano playing by
Mr. Randy Waltz.
Yes.
Just waiting for us in the other room.
I think I saw his shadow a moment ago.
You know, one thing that I just like to put into context when we talk about these early musical films is the whole realm of silent movie making that came before this. And it had already been developing for many, many years.
There were about 35 years of movies before sound was the official way to go in Hollywood. And we'd had feature films for at least 20 of those years, you know, slightly more. So
you have this new technology emerging, and right at the time when we're having a complete economic upheaval with the crash. And so it just seems to me that those two factors just forced everybody to jump ship as fast as possible and cling on to this new technology. And whoever's going to survive has just got to jump on that ship. And so the interesting thing about these early years is that the films seem so clunky and primitive in comparison. So there must have been these odd years of folks first encountering their favorite film stars and their voices for the very first time, the pressures on the Hollywood performers to jump onto this new ship in any way, shape, or form, and all the pressures of that.
Well, you're so right. It was in the year 1929 that Hollywood said, okay, we're only making talkies from now on. And they did not realize that October, Wall Street would crash. And at first, that didn't impact Hollywood greatly. It certainly impacted Broadway because a lot of Broadway theaters closed quickly. But Hollywood had a few months where they thought they'd get through this okay, especially since they had this exciting new attraction of sound. And sound had been in development for many years, and you'll find some kind of rare oddity early sound films before this, but really 1929 is the year that all the movies were made in sound. And that meant that all of these great movie stars had to introduce themselves to audiences all over again. And audiences would find out if the way that these people sounded in their imaginations was the way they sounded in real life. And many actors were excited about that. Some actors benefited greatly from the switch and were even more popular. Think of someone like Ronald Colman, who had such a great voice and was a silent star into the sounds. And other actors were terrified. And there were casualties along the way, like delightful Clara Bow, who was so popular in the late 20s. And she had a sort of a Brooklyn voice, and she didn't look forward to sound. And some of these actors, like John Gilbert, who had a good voice, were not either directed well or recorded well or given good scripts. And so some of them got a reputation for not being effective in sound. So, but many, many great stars came out of this new era. I mean, we would not have the Fred and Ginger movies. We would not have the big Warner Brothers Busby Berkeley movies if not for sound. And I thought it would be fun to start our look at how Hollywood figured out how to make talkies by talking about something that virtually all of the major studios did, nearly all of them did, which was make a big movie with really no plot and show off all of their stars in either comedy skits or musical numbers or a little bit of both. And before we proceed, Janet, you were so kind last time to let me talk about Max Steiner, the subject of my biography. And this time, I'm going to be an author plugging someone else's book because I highly recommend to your viewers a wonderful book that's been out for a number of years, and I have reread it several times, called A Song in the Dark by Richard Barrios. It's all about this transition period of how movie musicals began in the talkie era. And one of the things that all the studios did was, as I've said, make these films showing off their actors. And so I thought it'd be fun to show a little bit of one of those, well, two of those, and that might lead to a song from you. Yes, and I know a movie that well, they're all fascinating to us, but one that you and I both have watched several times is MGM's big movie, which was called Hollywood Review of 1929.
Yes, and you
And
mentioned at the top about Singing in the Rain, which everyone thinks of as Gene Kelly's movie. And of course, the wonderful scene of him singing in the rain and swinging on the lamppost and everything. However, that movie was a reprise of the musical music from Hollywood Review of 1929.
yes, and amazingly, the song Singing in the Rain goes back even further. It was written 2 years before that movie in 1927 for a stage show called the Hollywood Music Box Review. And nobody remembered that song. Whatever people went to that show, they didn't pay any attention to Singing in the Rain. So 2 years later, when MGM was crafting this big movie to show off all of its stars in different ways, the song Singing in the Rain was featured. And first we hear it from Cliff Edwards, future voice of Jiminy Cricket in the movie Pinocchio. And then the movie ends with all of the MGM stars who can sing and many who don't sing, all singing a chorus of Singing in the Rain. And what is fascinating to learn, courtesy of Mr. Barrios's book, is that big finale with everyone in two-strip Technicolor singing in the Rain was filmed just 10 days before the movie's premiere, because they realized by that time how big the song was going to be. So that last clip was really shoehorned in at the last moment. And let's take a little look at that.
Oh boy.
So there you have a little bit of the ending of Hollywood Review of 1929. And boy, it didn't lack for stars. You had everyone from Marion Davies and Joan Crawford to Buster Keaton and Laurel and Hardy. The only MGM star practically you don't see in it is Lon Chaney, but they sing a song about him, so, believe it or not. And it's a very well, let's say they tried to make it like going to the theater. They had an overture. They had like a live pit orchestra playing in the big theaters. They had a billboard of live young women posing in different ways to create the words Hollywood Review of 1929. And apparently it stopped so much traffic in New York that the NYPD shut them down on the second day. But I know you've seen that and had some thoughts on that movie and the way it was made, Janet.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind on that and some of the other early film musicals is that they almost seem like a filming of a live theatrical show, like something that would have been the Ziegfeld Follies, where they'd have these dramatic scenes of choruses and bedazzled showgirls in formations. That also is something that continued with Busby Berkeley, but in the earlier films, they're very static.
Yeah, it sort of feels like you're sitting in the third row of the Broadway theater or the 10th row watching it. And it is not, the movies like that are not a very imaginatively shot. Well, the other studios also featured their stars in movies that were like that, but usually more creative than the MGM version. And my favorite is one that just received a few years ago, a mammoth restoration, and I think is quite a stunning film called The King of Jazz. You've seen King of Jazz, right, Janet?
Many times.
I thought so. And so they hired a great Broadway director, John Murray Anderson, to take a lot of the great stage tableaus, the Ziegfeld-like musical numbers he'd done, and adapt them to the movie. And it would all be built around band leader Paul Whiteman and his great orchestra and his trio of singers called the Rhythm Boys, which included Bing Crosby. And the camera work is really imaginative. And they spent a fortune licensing George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, which was only 6 years old, a piece of music that had been commissioned by Paul Whiteman, the band leader featured in this movie. And they perform a pretty substantial, if abbreviated, version of Rhapsody in Blue. And I thought it would be fun to share a few minutes of this film. And you'll see, I think, just how imaginatively already they are using camera angles and how much more stylish this is.
Absolutely.
So that was The King of Jazz, released in 1930. And that same year, Paramount Pictures released another of these Meet Our Stars in the Talking movies called Paramount on Parade. It is not out on home video, which is a shame because it has a terrific cast of people, from Frederick March and Clara Bow to many, many other stars. There's a little, and it isn't just musical numbers. There's a little skit with the detectives, with Sherlock Holmes and Philo Vance and all the various actors who played them at Paramount doing scenes. And among the directors was Ernst Lubitsch, the great filmmaker, who did a couple of the segments. So Paramount on Parade is a movie that we'd all love to see a good copy of. And it has a great song in it that I just love, sung by Nancy Carroll, called Dancing to Save Your Soul. And that's S-O-L-E. And she dances it on a giant shoe and it's a really wild number. You can find it
How
on
to
YouTube.
dance and save your shoe leather.
Yes, exactly. So they were taking all these different approaches and as you said, in a real sink or swim way. Now, I'm happy to report that even though we can't just watch those movies right now, we can hear you sing a couple of songs from them. Is that correct, Janet?
You betcha.
Okay.
We're going to do a couple little songs for you. One from the Hollywood Review of 1929, originally performed in that film by Joan Crawford and the Biltmore Trio. And then we'll go right into another one from 1930 from Paramount on Parade. And it's called Dancing to Save Your Soul. And in the sheet music, it's spelled S-O-L-E. It's about shoe leather. All right, here goes. All day I talk about you. All night I dream about you. I just want to be someone you'd like to see. You got me walking on air. I only hope that you care. I'd be satisfied just to hang around you. Crazy about your style, free and easy smile. You're a
I'm sure that you'll agree. You can relax while dancing if you will follow me. Heel toe, start with your right foot fast, slow, don't be a light foot, let's go. Dancing to save your soul. All slide, do it together now, glide, saving your leather, you try. Dancing to save your soul. One dance will never make you grow weary, dearie. It's easy, just like taking a stroll with your boyfriend, heel toe. Start with your right foot fast, slow, don't be a flat foot, let's go. Dancing to save your soul. Yeah, Randy. One dance will never break you go weary, dearie. It's easy, just like taking a stroll with your boyfriend, heel toe. Start with the right foot, let's go. Don't be a flat foot, let's go. Dancing to save your soul.
Janet, that was so much fun.
Woo!
And I think people should know that doing these is kind of, it's a ruse on my part to get Janet to sing all these songs that I love so much. That's really the reason that we do Hollywood Parlor Parties. But anyway, but thank you for that.
Oh, I'm so excited to learn some new material. I haven't performed these out and about yet. So this is all for you, Stephen.
And for everybody. And so that brings us to part 2 of our conversation here. And what was that, Janet, of our early Hollywood movie making of musicals?
Well, during this time when these film musicals with sound were becoming the rage and the sensation of the day, at the same time, because of the crash, because of the economic disaster, many of the shows on Broadway had been drastically reduced, and so some of the folks that were participating in Broadway, the composers and the performers, the theatrical actors, of course, they were known already for singing, dancing, and acting on stage. They were the great content hope of the Hollywood folks. So they brought in a lot of that talent, and they tried their hand in Hollywood to various outcomes.
Absolutely. Yes. As you're saying, the energy of Broadway was something that Hollywood was very interested in when they started making movie musicals, because it made sense to bank on a sure thing. And you didn't get much more sure than people like George and Ira Gershwin, or Rodgers and Hart, or Irving Berlin. So in 1929, 1930, Hollywood said, let's try to get these top songwriters to write some songs, write a show for us, write songs for our movies. And similarly, a lot of Broadway performers who would be known but only seen by those who saw them perform in New York, or if they toured some other city, performers like Fanny Brice could potentially have a worldwide movie audience if they starred in movies. So a lot of Broadway stars were very interested in taking part in the movies. And the result was a very mixed bag. Some people did very well in this combination, and it took a little while to figure some of these out. Among the successful stories of Broadway to the movies would be the Marx Brothers, because they had just become famous on Broadway and shows like The Coconuts and Animal Crackers. And Paramount very smartly had them film their proven stage shows for the movies. And they were so brash and they spoke with such energy and excitement, they became movie stars. Fanny Brice, unfortunately, did not have as successful a transition to the movies. Her first movie was a big vehicle showcasing her called My Man. And Warner Brothers made it, and it's lost. And they have, thanks to Ron Hutchison, we have all the discs so we can hear it. But it's one of those, like The Jazz Singer, where it's mostly a silent movie until she sings, kind of movies.
Right.
But it's lost, and that's a shame.
I just wish that there were more recorded film clips of her. There are some wonderful 78 RPM records. So she was, famous for her appearances in the Ziegfeld Follies. And, they tell the story in Funny Girl, sort of, I don't know how much of it is true, that she wanted to be in the chorus, but she had knobby knees and was skinny and all of that, and a goofball, but she sort of gets in, and then she's recognized as a comic star. And I'm not sure how much of that is true, but I know that she was a star in the Ziegfeld Follies, along with people like Eddie Cantor and Ruth Edding, another one of my very favorite musical performers. And so anyway, the to hear her on the records is really stunning. I mean, you really hear every nuance of fun and sort of her Yiddish dialect humor, but what you don't get is her physical humor. And so there are only a few films, from what I know, where she appears. And one of them is a favorite of mine called Be Yourself, that she did with Robert Armstrong.
And we can actually share a little clip of that as well. So here is Fanny Brice singing When a Woman Loves a Man.
Mountains snap their fingers at time since this whole world began, but they're molehills compared to the mountains she'll climb when a gal cares for a man. Rivers have been flowing for years, part of the mighty plan, but they're ripples compared to the river of tears when a gal weeps for a man. Beggar, a millionaire, crooked around the square, mansion or furnished room, she doesn't care when a woman loves a man. Sharing each pain and ill, both born through the mill, just being miserable gives her a thrill when a woman loves a man.
So there's Fanny Brice. And I'm so happy, Janet, that you have celebrated her music and style of music so much. And in fact, there is a song from the movie we're talking about, Be Yourself, that you do magnificently. I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Oy, I do. It's called Cooking Breakfast for the One I Love. And it's just super charming.
Might we hear it?
You bet.
Mornings I'll be getting up. Mornings I'll be setting up a tiny table for two. Breakfast I'll be making his breakfast. love. I cooked a plate of steaming oatmeal, tasted but shucks. Who the heck likes oatmeal sprinkled with Lux? I'm sorry. To prove that he's grateful, he eats a big plateful and faints right after breakfast for the one he loves. Thank you.
Oh, oi, oi.
Oh, that is such a fun and happy song.
Oh, darling.
And it's a little risque. All those songs about having breakfast, that was code at the time, because you're having breakfast with the person you love. That probably means that they stayed over. So that's a detail perhaps lost to us in modern times. But yes, so Fanny Brice, charming and wonderful, but the movies pretty much decided after they saw this film, Be Yourself, that she wasn't your traditional leading lady of the movies. So she went back to the stage, and we see her pretty much after that only in movies in which she is playing herself, like The Great Ziegfeld or Ziegfeld Follies. And so she remained like Sophie Tucker, a famous personality, but just somebody that sadly for us didn't leave a whole lot of film record for us to enjoy. But thank goodness you do that, Janet. I'm so glad you sing her songs.
I'm ready. I love carrying on her great tunes. Many of them were written by a lady composer named Blanche Merrill. So the movie Be Yourself was from what year? And then when she came back and did the cameo on The Great Ziegfeld, what year was that film?
Well, Be Yourself was 1930, and The Great Ziegfeld, which did win Best Picture, that was 1936, in which she plays herself as we see many people who were in real life associated with Florence Ziegfeld, played in the film by William Powell. So again, she was really only called back to the movies when they wanted her to be Fanny Brice, the stage performer. But she did a lot of radio too, so we can also enjoy her Baby Snooks performances on radio.
I wish there was more still.
Me too.
Stephen, I think you were going to tell us some more about some other of the Broadway composers that came to Hollywood and what their experiences were.
Yes. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't mention again George and Ira Gershwin, because George and his brother Ira were superstars on Broadway by this time. They'd done the musical Lady Be Good. They had just had a huge smash with Girl Crazy, featuring the songs I Got Rhythm, Embraceable You. And so Fox, not yet 20th Century Fox, but Fox Studios in 1930 had the bright idea to hire the Gershwin brothers to come out from New York to Hollywood. It wasn't going to just be phoned in or mailed in. They had the Gershwin brothers come to Hollywood to write songs for a movie called Delicious, starring their biggest leading lady of the day, Janet Gaynor. And George and Ira had a wonderful time. It was their first trip to California, so they were very happy to come out across the country and be in beautiful Southern California on Fox's dime. And they worked very hard. And in addition to writing delightful songs for this movie, George Gershwin used the time to write another of his concert works. He was already famous for writing Rhapsody in Blue, which was premiered in 1924, and this is 1930. Well, for the movie Delicious, he wrote an instrumental piece that had many different names at different times. It is shown during a montage of Janet Gaynor going through the noisy and very 20th century modern city of machines, and it was called the Manhattan Rhapsody and the Rhapsody for Rivets. It's basically just an interesting piece of music in the movie, but George, when he got back to New York, reworked that music, and it became his second Rhapsody, which is one of his most performed concert pieces. So George delivered the delightful songs that Fox wanted, and he also wrote some terrific underscoring that, as I say, turned into a great concert piece of his. And typically, not all of the songs that George and Ira wrote for the movie Delicious were used. And one of them is a song called You Started It. And in the movie, we hear it as background music, but it was not sung. But I think that is going to be remedied in a moment, because Janet, can you share with us this largely unknown, very, very obscure and unjustly overlooked Gershwin song, You Started It?
I'm going to give that a try right now.
Thank you.
I traveled hither, yonder, thither, happy as a king. One day I met love and I let love do that fatal thing. I once was gayer than the mayor of New York, but now from dawn to sundown I am run down with the blues and how. I know just how I got this way. You started it, can't sleep all night and dream all day. You started it with not a worry, all the years went by. Then what happened? I caught your eye. Who is it started raising Cain? You started it, will pardon me if I complain. You started it, you started something and you've got to see it through. And love me as I love you. Who is it keeps on raising Cain and started it? You'll pardon me if I complain. You started it, you started something and you've got to see it through. And love me as I love you.
How in the world did you know about such an obscure song as You Started It?
Well, as we were talking about this subject, I consulted the great Frederick Hodges, pianist and music historian, and he cited this as one of the sad deletions in a Hollywood musical film.
I'm so glad we have you singing it. And Frederick Hodges does a wonderful recording of it on the CD that you see right now. So go out and order this CD because it is a perfect complement to what you just heard Janet sing. So thank you, Frederick, for that rediscovery. And yes, so the Gershwins had a pretty good time, but then they went back to Broadway and wrote one of their biggest shows, Of Thee I Sing, won a Pulitzer Prize. Can't do much better than that. And I was hoping we might talk about my very favorite songwriting team of this era, Richard Rodgers and Rodgers Hart, some of whose songs I know you sing, Janet, because they had an interesting experience in Hollywood. Some of it very good, some of it not so good.
I love these stories.
Well, Richard Rodgers and Rodgers Hart had written songs like I'll Take Manhattan. Manhattan is its official name, and Mountain Greenery, Thou Swell, The Girlfriend, all these fabulous hit 20s songs. And they were summoned or invited to come to Paramount Pictures in 1932 to write the score for a musical called Love Me Tonight. And it turned out to be one of the greatest movie musicals ever made. If you haven't seen it, I'm happy to say it's on DVD, Blu-ray, and I hope streaming. And Love Me Tonight starred Maurice Chevalier, Jeanette MacDonald. It introduced songs like Isn't It Romantic and Mimi and just so many others. And it is a terrific movie from start to finish. And it has a lot of rhyming musical dialogue written by Rodgers and Hart. So that was, right out of the gate, a huge success. After Love Me Tonight, unfortunately, their experiences in Hollywood were not as good. They wrote an interesting score for a movie called Hallelujah, I'm a Bum, which in Britain was called Hallelujah, I'm a Tramp, because bum means something else in England for your viewers there. And although it produced a wonderful song called You Are Too Beautiful, it became a standard, that movie was not a hit. And then they were called by the biggest studio of all, MGM, to write songs for what everyone hoped would be a super extravagant extravaganza originally titled Hollywood Review of 1933. But it didn't turn out to have that name, and it didn't turn out to be a success.
And the final title was Hollywood Party.
Yes.
Well, it's actually a favorite movie of mine, in spite of the fact that it's threadbare and crazy. It's a crazy mess. And I'm sure there's many, many stories, because I know that there were multiple directors involved and things that were written for it and cut out, and just a crazy mishmash. And the story is silly as can be, starring Jimmy Durante as an actor playing the part of Schnarzan. He was known for his schnazola. And Lupe Velez was in it, the Laurel and Hardy.
And it was anything but a party to make, because as you mentioned, many directors, interestingly, not one of them takes the credit. And this is, I believe, the only MGM feature of the 30s where there is no director credit, in spite of the fact that it had directors like Edmund Goulding, who had made Grand Hotel, all these people. And yes, you can look at this movie as you do, Janet, as just a fascinating, crazy smorgasbord of, look, there's Laurel and Hardy, look, they're the Three Stooges, there's everybody. And I look at it as, oh my gosh, the talent that was involved that was wasted. When they first announced this movie, and we know that press releases often fib, but the press release said that this movie was going to showcase Clark Gable and Jean Harlow, the biggest stars at MGM. And Rodgers and Hart wrote a song for Jean Harlow called Prayer, in which she was supposed to be an aspiring actress singing, "Oh Lord, if you can hear me up there, oh, won't you answer my prayer? Please don't give me the air." And
I would have loved to have seen Jean Harlow sing.
Well, she didn't sing, and the song wasn't used, but Rodgers and Hart liked that melody. And a few years later, that melody became the song Blue Moon. So MGM really missed out on that one. But Rodgers and Hart were very frustrated because they wrote over a dozen songs for Hollywood Party, and almost all of them were discarded, thrown out. Some were filmed and not used. And Rodgers and Hart, who were so used to producing these big hit Broadway shows, it'd be like hiring a Stephen Sondheim or Andrew Lloyd Webber and telling them to just wait around for a couple of months, and then having them turn in lots of things and not hearing anything until they find out that none of it was being used, or very little of it was being used. And there's a funny story that when the director Alan Dwan was brought in to look at an assemblage of all this footage made by different directors and all these different scenes that had nothing to do with each other, he looked at it and apparently said, "This is a nightmare." And someone said, "That's it. It's going to be a nightmare." And so they filmed a framing device where Jimmy Durante literally wakes up at the end, and this has all been a dream or a nightmare. It's one of those, it was all a dream movies. And all I can say is that exhibitors en masse across the country wrote MGM and said, "Please do not make any more movies like this. This was one of the worst experiences we've had." So anyway, however, there is a fun trailer that gives you a little sense of this chaos, and let's watch that, shall we?
Great.
Has a master of ceremonies. The Hollywood party must have one, but there seems to be an argument. That settles it. There'll be no master of ceremonies. On with the Hollywood party.
You'll scratch your face. I wonder how I do with those tactics. Let me give you what is commonly known as the works.
What's the matter with you? Are you going crazy?
don't seem to have the right purchase.
Okay, but underneath this fine skin beats a heart seat with sentiment.
Oh, I bet you say that to every animal. Go on.
No!
They take a lot of time showing you all that stock footage of people around the world traveling to this movie.
It just that the picture doesn't fit with what they're telling you. The people are coming from, the big city and they're showing Eskimos or something.
Yeah, that kind of sums up this movie. But they did use the title song for the movie, Hollywood Party, written by Rodgers and Hart. And I'm happy to say that that is a staple in the Janet Klein repertoire, is it not?
I can't wait to do it for you right now.
Phone's busy, we're dizzy, it's that affair. He's going, she's going, they're going there. Put on your bib and tucker, put on your soup and fish. I'm going, you're going, this is our dish. Hollywood party, get up, get out, get in it. Hollywood party, oh, nobody sleeps tonight. Bring along your girl, go home with someone else's. Forget about your girl, 'cause she's gonna do alright. We'll be kicking our heels up till the roosters are crowing. Bring your automobiles up, everybody is going. A Hollywood party, going a mile a minute. Hollywood party, oh, nobody sleeps tonight. Come on and wear your white tie, it's the right tie for tonight. I meet you at that noisy girls and boys Hollywood party. All the minks and sables, wines with labels, garbos, gables greet you. Taxis send us to the tremendous Hollywood party. All the girls wear coats that they got from men, but tomorrow they're gonna give them back again. So let the laughter spring out, music sing out, Satan spring out, yeah man. And that crashing furniture smashing Hollywood party. Get out, get out, get out. Hollywood party, nobody sleeps tonight.
Yay!
Thank you, Janet.
Party.
I love hearing you sing that. And I can understand the lyrics much more clearly when you sing it than in the movie. So that's great.
Oh, wow. Listen, I got that from the film and I just adore the scene with Frances Williams delivering it. Frances Williams at the time was known as the queen of Broadway's Queen of Jazz. And just love the scene with all the Holly. She's surrounded by all these switchboard operators who are gossiping about that party.
Yes.
So I just I'm always thinking of that scene in my head when I do it. So all of that said, I know that there were some wonderful movies that were written for Hollywood with music that was a success.
Yeah, so I don't want to leave people with the impression that all of these early Hollywood musicals were misfires, because they weren't. I mentioned Love Me Tonight, the great Rodgers and Hart movie from 1932. Well, as early as 1929, the brilliant German-born director Ernst Lubitsch, the master of the sophisticated romantic comedy, or sex comedy, perhaps more accurately, Ernst Lubitsch directed a musical called The Love Parade in 1929, starring Maurice Chevalier and someone pretty new to the screen, Jeanette MacDonald. And this movie was a big hit and launched a series of Lubitsch musicals. And Lubitsch was such a clever filmmaker. He wasn't afraid of sound. He used it really cleverly. And not only do we hear Maurice Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald sing, but we get Lillian Roth and Lupino Lane, the great British music performer. And at one point, one of the songs is reprised by a chorus of dogs.
Yes.
You'll just have to see the movie, but I'm not lying to you. Dogs sing in this movie, and they're great. And there's some really charming original songs. And among them is a song that Maurice Chevalier sings in the movie. But Janet, I know that this is a song that you sing, which is plenty exciting, but even more exciting is the fact that this is not on any of your CDs. This is something that we are going to hear live and you cannot hear on one of your recordings. Is that correct?
You betcha. Here's a new one from me and Mr. Randy Wolks.
Fabulous.
So we have a couple of little tunes right now. One is from The Love Parade with Maurice Chevalier. And the second was a little ditty that comes from a movie called The Cuckoos. And the tune was written by Kelmer and Ruby. Here goes.
I've a pair of arms to hug and hold, but nobody's using them now. I've loads of love that could be told, but nobody's using it now. I've a world of charms that's all my own. They say that you go silly if you spend it alone. I'm telling the truth, I'm just wasting my youth. There's nobody's using it now. No, 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 no. Nobody's using it now. Just look at me. I think my heart will break. Nobody seems to take me seriously. Honestly, I'm just as lonely as a gal can be. The days mean nothing at all, and when the shadows fall, the moon is only wasting time on me. Candidly, there must be something awful wrong with me. I've a pair of arms to hug and hold, but nobody's using them now. I've loads of love that
That is so much fun. I love that song. Thank you for singing that.
Ah,
And it's interesting that there were performers like Dorothy Lee who made a lot of movies that people don't remember today, in spite of the fact that she's really charming. And I'm glad that she has a following. And there was another actress who had a brief following of the time at Warner Brothers named Alice White. And I think you've seen her in a movie or two, right?
yes. I love watching her. She's very fun to watch, very curious.
She is, and she's very much a type of the time. And again, I want to recommend Richard Barrios's wonderful book, A Song in the Dark, because when I saw these early Warner Brothers movies, I saw Alice White in movies for a couple of years, and then she disappears. And then in a later Jimmy Cagney movie, they say, Alice White is back, and she has a supporting kind of vampish part. And I thought, who was Alice White? Well, Alice White was I will quote the author, Richard Barrios, who he says, she was pert, very cute and sexy. Starting as a studio stenographer, she nudged her way to a place before the camera, bleached her hair, and became First National's blonde equivalent of Clara Bow. And I should say that First National was a division of Warner Brothers. And she had a hit with a movie musical in this period we're talking about called Showgirls. So what did they follow it up with? Well, Showgirl in Hollywood. And I thought it would be fun to look at a few seconds of that movie now so people can see Alice White in this early Warner Brothers musical.
Baby, I bet you I'm gonna get you. Ooh, I've got my eye on you. I don't know why, but Jiminy G, you seem to be just what the doctor ordered for me. Ooh, I tell my heart you'll do. Right from the start, you've had my okay. Can't get away. I've got my eye on you. I got my eye on you. Right from the start, you had my okay. Can't get away. I've got my eye on you.
So there's Alice White. And the reason she didn't stick around was that her talent, to quote Dorothy Parker's famous remark about Katharine Hepburn, not a fair one, but a very quotable quote, Alice White's talent apparently ranged the gamut from A to B. And she'd pretty much done what she could and then moved on, and Hollywood moved on. And she also had a reputation for being temperamental, which is never a good thing in Hollywood if you don't have a tremendous track record behind you. But her movies did produce some fun songs, and I am delighted to report that you know one that people probably haven't heard before, right?
There's one I love from a movie from 1930 called Playing Around, called You Learn About Love Every Day.
Probably by playing around, but I'll let you sing it. I'll just listen and learn.
Love is something peculiar. Love is something that's grand. Yet no one figures out what love is all about. Love is always a puzzle, ever old and yet new. You never seem to know
There's something about her that is so fascinating because the way that she's utilized, you think, how did this girl get to be the star? Because everybody else is actually dancing and singing, carry on around her. And they always film her very, clumsily, like from the waist up, kind of going like this or something, because she obviously really wasn't much of a singer or a dancer, but she's so, she's still really fun to watch. She's just vulnerably, she's hanging in there.
And it's telling that Hollywood was willing to put relatively unknown people into movies or try to bring in someone from Broadway to see if it worked. They were throwing things up against the wall in these first days of movie musicals. And they made a lot of movie musicals between 1929 and 1931. You wouldn't think that's a very long time, but it was long enough for Hollywood to make a lot of bad, or let's say repetitious and similar to each other movie musicals, not the kind we think of today with ingenious camera work and a lot of style, but ones that, as we talked about earlier, are rather static in the way they're filmed, and the chorus girls come in and kick and then go out. A lot of them were backstage melodrama stories with sort of the same plot told over and over. And by 1931, moviegoers, especially since their nickels and dimes were not going as far during the Depression, moviegoers stopped going to musicals because Hollywood simply wasn't making enough good ones. And that created a sort of panic within the industry, because this whole genre that they thought would be around suddenly seemed to be no longer of interest to moviegoers. That is, musicals. There are even stories that one theater marquee, or some, would put up on the marquee under the title of their latest film, "Not a Musical."
I love that.
And this led to some interesting developments, which leads us to a movie called Reaching for the Moon. Have you seen that movie, Janet?
I love this movie. Actually, it was the first time I had ever encountered Douglas Fairbanks speaking. I just found him so surprisingly charming, really fun on screen, and was able to sort of make fun of his that swashbuckling character that he was known for in the silent movie days. And he did a great job in this movie. He played a tycoon who wouldn't waste a moment.
Exactly. And speaking of tycoons, this is the kind of movie that if you had money, you could imagine people putting money into making. Because how's this for a list of talent? Douglas Fairbanks, one of the biggest stars of the silent era. Irving Berlin, arguably the greatest songwriter in America, writing an original score. A fabulous, fun supporting cast like B.B. Daniels and the great comic actor Everett Horton. And directing it all is Edmund Goulding, who just a couple of years later would direct Grand Hotel, the Best Picture winner of 1932. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, kind of everything, because the fact that they conceived Reaching for the Moon as a movie musical was something that the studio decided was a bad idea once audiences stopped going to movie musicals. And this is a case where they actually filmed all of these Irving Berlin songs. And Irving Berlin was musical royalty at the time. This was not some kid on his way up. Irving Berlin was an American institution. And if you look at the early ads for the movie, his name is very prominent in the selling of them. And then when you look at the ads for when the movie came out, there is virtually no mention of him. Why? Because United Artists decided to cut out every single song that Irving Berlin wrote for the movie, except for one. And Irving Berlin was so understandably angered by this that he would have nothing to do with Hollywood until late in 1934. RKO said, "Will you please come to Hollywood and write the score for Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and we will give you a percentage of the profits." And after that, Irving Berlin decided that maybe movies were okay. That movie, Top Hat, became a great success. And of course, we have many great Irving Berlin movie musicals. But back in 1930-31, it was not a happy time when he learned that all of his songs, except one, were cut out. And here's a little clip from the one song in Reaching for the Moon that the filmmakers did leave in, and see if you recognize this largely unknown young man who suddenly pops into this room and starts singing it with B.B. Daniels.
Lenox Avenue is known for doing the low down, but you'll find they're not alone in doing the low down. Fifth Avenue's learning how they had to fall. Fifth Avenue does it now. That's that mean? Low down, now there's no low down lower than that. Whenever the swell low down and become low down, there's no low down lower than that. You may believe it or not, when they start getting hot, now there's no hot top hotter than that. So you can lay your dough down when they go low down. There's no low down lower than that.
I ask you to leave low down. There is no low down lower than that. Whenever the swell low down and become low down, there's no low down lower than that. You may believe it or not, when they start getting hot, there is no hot top that's hotter than that. So you can lay your dough down when they go low down. There is no low down lower than that.
Wonderful. What
Gives
a
you a little taste of what it might have been like.
Oh my gosh. And you say that they actually filmed the other Berlin song numbers. Where did the film footage go?
Well, like most film footage of that time, it was not deemed of any value and it was destroyed. And it's really strange because the title of the movie, Reaching for the Moon, comes from a really tuneful Irving Berlin song that you hear as underscoring, but which is never sung in the movie and happily was later recorded by people. And so that's an example of when things didn't go right. And for a little while in that period of 1931, 1932, most of the studios did not make movie musicals. There were a few exceptions, but they pretty much stayed away for it. So that if moviegoers heard a song in a movie, it's because there was a torch singer or a band on stage in the movie playing that song. And there's an example of that in the Paramount film Hot Saturday. And that is definitely a double entendre title. It is a movie where on a hot day, things happen that may involve Nancy Carroll, Cary Grant, and Randolph Scott. But I leave that to you to watch in the movie. It is out on video. And there's a song that people don't know in the movie, and appropriately enough for a movie called Hot Saturday, it is called I'm Burning for You. And Janet, would you familiarize us with that song?
All right, here goes. This is that tune, I'm Burning for You. Which thank you to Frederick Hodges, who had the sheet music for this thing. So yeah, dreams come true. Here goes.
Thank you for that. That was wonderful. Well, I would happily spend all day listening to you sing, but I know you have places to go. So I'll wrap up this story about the first years of movie musicals by saying that, yes, of course, movie musicals did make a big comeback. In 1933, Warner Brothers released 42nd Street with all that incredible cinematic ingenuity of Busby Berkeley's dance numbers. That was the same year that RKO launched its series, Accidental series, with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, who were paired as supporting players in Flying Down to Rio, and that launched the greatest dance teaming in the history of movie musicals for them. And after those movies in 1933, luckily for us, movie musicals never really went away. They had their ups and downs time-wise, but they still make them, and they certainly made them in the 30s and 40s. But there's one song that is not on any disc of yours, Janet, and it comes from this period. So you would make me very happy if we wrapped up today's Parlor Party by singing a song from a 1932 pre-code comedy, not a musical, but it has one great song in it, sung by Lupe Valdez. And that song is called Oh, Mr. Carpenter. And tell me, there's kind of a little bittersweet backstory to how you learned this song. Would you mind sharing that with me?
Well, our mutual friend, Ron Hutchinson, who is one of the founders of the Vitaphone Project, which we talk about all the time because he and a small group of collectors, some of whom collected the Vitaphone discs, usually record collectors ended up with these oversized discs. And then film collectors, they might have, film business from these early experiments with sound on film. And through the internet and this grassroots project, they were able to reunite some of the parts. And in some cases, Ron would send me soundtracks to lost Vitaphone films. And he was just such a dear friend. And he was after me for the longest time to learn this song that Lupe Velez does in The Half Naked Truth, called Oh, Mr. Carpenter. And so I just had to learn it. And I got to do it for Ron's birthday in New York City and sit in with the great Vince Giordano and his Nighthawks, who I hope are back at it and in business in New York City, the best night out in New York City. So, so here goes. I'll take it out with this crazy little tune.
Not on any Janet Klein CD yet, so enjoy.
All right, everybody, it's been a pleasure being with you all today. And so I'll do this song and we'll just head out on our merry way, and then we'll get together again sometime soon.
See you next time. Yes, absolutely, Janet. Thanks so much.
All right, pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. Here goes. So if your aim is high and if you're satisfied each day when you go by, I'll have a new job for you. Heard about your labor our bow. Yippee!
Phone's busy, we're dizzy, it's that affair. Why he's going, she's going, they're going there. Put on your bib and tucker, put on your soup and fish. I'm going, you're going, this is our dish. Hollywood party, get up, get out, get in there. Hollywood party, oh, nobody sleeps tonight. Bring along your girl, go home with someone else. Forget about your girl, 'cause she's gonna do alright. We'll be kicking our heels up till the roosters are crowing. Bring your automobiles up, everybody is going. Hollywood party, going a mile a minute. Hollywood party, oh, nobody sleeps tonight. Come on and wear your white tie, it's the right tie for tonight. I meet you at that noisy, girlsy and boysy Hollywood party. All the minks and sables, wines with labels, garbos, gables greet you. Taxis send us to the tremendous Hollywood party. All the girls wear ermine coats that they got from men. But tomorrow, oh, they're gonna give 'em back again. So let the laughter spring out, music ring out, Satan sing out, yeah, man. At that crashing, furniture smashing Hollywood party.